In 1942, a decorated British colonel walked into the Burmese jungle and vanished without a trace. No body, no farewell note, no explanation. For 84 years, military historians debated what happened to Colonel James Ashford. Desertion? Execution? Madness? Then, in 2026, archaeologists scanning remote jungle terrain found something that rewrote everything we thought we knew. The jungle had been keeping his secret all along. November 8, 1942. The monsoon rains hammered down on a forward British position near the Chindwin River in Burma. Colonel James Ashford sat in his command tent, reviewing maps by lamplight. His adjutant, Lieutenant Peter Thornton, noticed something unusual. The colonel was burning papers. "Sir, those are operational orders," Thornton said, watching classified documents curl and blacken in the small brazier. Ashford didn't look up. "Were operational orders, Lieutenant?" That was the last coherent conversation anyone had with him. By dawn, Colonel Ashford was gone. His rifle remained. His boots sat beside his cot. His uniform hung on its usual hook. But the man himself had disappeared into the densest, most hostile jungle on Earth, wearing nothing but standard-issue fatigues and carrying a rucksack that shouldn't have been packed. The initial search lasted 6 days. Gurkha trackers found his trail heading northeast, away from Japanese positions, away from British lines, away from anything that made tactical sense. Then the tracks simply stopped at a riverbank, as if he'd evaporated. Military police launched an investigation. What they uncovered made the disappearance even stranger. 3 weeks before vanishing, Ashford had requested detailed topographical surveys of an area 40 miles north. The region wasn't strategically significant. No Allied operations were planned there. When asked why he needed the maps, he'd claimed he was studying potential supply routes. His superiors approved the request without question. Ashford was, after all, one of their most trusted officers. A decorated veteran of the North Africa campaign, he'd earned the Distinguished Service Order at Tobruk. His men respected him. Command valued his tactical mind. Nothing in his record suggested instability or cowardice. Yet someone had been planning something. Ashford's tent yielded more mysteries. Hidden beneath his cot, investigators found a journal written in a cipher no one could break. They also discovered he'd been receiving letters from an Oxford anthropologist named Dr. Helena Marsh, a woman who specialized in indigenous tribes of Southeast Asia. The correspondence had been classified as personal mail and never examined. When military intelligence finally tracked down Dr. Marsh, she was teaching at Cambridge, having evacuated from Singapore a year earlier. Her statement was brief and unhelpful. James was interested in local cultures. We discussed ethnographic matters. Nothing more. She refused to elaborate. The official conclusion came swiftly. Colonel James Ashford was declared killed in action, presumed captured, and executed by Japanese forces. His name was added to the war memorial. His family received his medals. The file was closed. But people who knew him never accepted that explanation. James wasn't suicidal, and he certainly wasn't a coward, his brother Edward told a newspaper in 1955. Whatever he did, he had a reason, a damn good one. Over the decades, theories multiplied. Some believed Ashford had been running a covert intelligence operation that went wrong. Others suggested he'd suffered a mental breakdown from combat stress. The most exotic theory proposed he'd been recruited by the Americans for some classified mission in China. None of these explanations quite fit. The jungle kept its silence for 84 years. Dr. Sarah Chen wasn't looking for Colonel Ashford when she found him. She was mapping ancient trade routes. Chen led an archaeological team from the University of Sydney, using LiDAR technology to penetrate the jungle canopy in northern Myanmar. The region had been largely inaccessible for decades due to political instability and landmines. By 2026, limited access had finally been granted to research teams. LiDAR works by firing laser pulses from aircraft, measuring how long they take to bounce back. The technology can see through dense vegetation to reveal ground structures invisible to the naked eye. It's revolutionized archaeology, uncovering lost cities from Cambodia to Central America. On March 14, 2026, Chen's team was scanning a particularly remote valley when their screens lit up with something unexpected. Geometric patterns, clear right angles, structures that couldn't be natural. "We thought it might be a forgotten temple complex," Chen later explained to National Geographic. The area had historical significance as a trade corridor, but when we processed the data, the architecture was all wrong for the period. The structures weren't ancient, they were modern, or at least 20th century modern. Getting to the site required a 3-day trek from the nearest village, hacking through undergrowth that hadn't seen human traffic in generations. 2 local guides refused to continue after the second day, claiming the valley was cursed. The remaining team pressed forward. What they found defied explanation. Hidden beneath 84 years of jungle growth was a compound. Not a military outpost, not a research station, something entirely different. The main structure was a large building constructed from local timber and stone, built into the hillside for natural camouflage. Its design showed sophisticated understanding of tropical architecture, with elevated floors to prevent flooding and ventilation systems to manage heat. Surrounding it were smaller outbuildings, a workshop, storage facilities, what appeared to be living quarters, and, strangest of all, an elaborate garden system with irrigation channels that still held stagnant water. Someone had built a permanent settlement here. Someone had intended to stay. The team's photographer, Marcus Webb, was the first to enter the main building. Inside, time had stopped. Furniture sat where it had been left, a desk with papers weighted down by stones. Bookshelves lined with volumes in English, many on anthropology and linguistics. A detailed map of the region pinned to one wall, marked with notations in faded ink. And in the corner, a trunk with initials stamped on the lid, J.R.A. James Reginald Ashford. I stood there staring at those initials for a full minute, Webb recalled. Then I called Dr. Chen. I told her we hadn't found an archaeological site. We'd found a missing person. The trunk contained Ashford's personal effects. His service revolver, never fired. A photograph of a woman, unidentified. Letters from Dr. Helena Marsh. These ones more revealing than the sanitized versions military intelligence had seen. And a journal. Not encrypted this time. Written in clear English. Chen's hands trembled as she opened it. The first entry was dated November 9, 1942, the day after Ashford disappeared. I have made my choice. There is no returning from it now. They will call me deserter, traitor, madman. Let them. They cannot understand what I have found here, what I have been called to protect. The entries that followed painted a picture no one had imagined. Ashford hadn't deserted. He hadn't broken down. He'd made a deliberate choice based on something he'd discovered months before his disappearance. During a reconnaissance patrol in August 1942, Ashford's unit had stumbled upon a village, not on any map, not known to British intelligence. The inhabitants spoke a language none of his translators recognized. They showed no fear of us, Ashford wrote. No curiosity about the war. They existed outside the entire context of our conflict, as if the 20th century had simply passed them by. What happened next changed everything. The village elder had shown Ashford something. The journal didn't specify what, but whatever it was, it convinced a decorated British officer to abandon his post, his career, his entire life. I contacted Helena immediately. Another entry read, "She confirmed my suspicions. This is not merely an isolated tribe. This is something that predates our understanding of this region's history, something that must be preserved." Chen flipped through more pages, her team gathering around her. Ashford's entries became increasingly detailed, describing his preparations to disappear, his secret supply runs, his construction of the compound, but they also became stranger. The Guardian arrived today. Read an entry from January 1943. She speaks their tongue now, as I am learning to. She says the war will end, but our work here will continue long after. The Guardian. Ashford mentioned this person repeatedly, but never by name. Someone who had joined him in the jungle, someone who shared his mission. Found reference to ceremonies, Ashford wrote in March 1943. Not religious, in the Western sense. Something older. Helena was right. This changes everything we think we know. The final entry was dated August 15, 1945. The day Japan surrendered. The war is over. I heard it on the wireless yesterday. The world is celebrating. But my war continues. The protection of this place, these people, their knowledge, that is the war that matters now. That is the war I will fight until my last breath. Then nothing. No more entries. No explanation for why he stopped writing. Chen looked up at her team. We need to search the entire compound, every building. There has to be more. What they found over the next 3 days would spark international controversy and rewrite a forgotten chapter of World War II history. The second building yielded nothing but rotting furniture and water-damaged supplies. But the third structure, partially collapsed and overgrown with vines, contained something that made Chen's blood run cold. Photographs. Hundreds of them, carefully preserved in sealed metal containers. The images showed Ashford, not alone. Standing beside him in dozens of shots was a woman. European, dark hair, maybe 30 years old. She wore practical jungle clothing, not military uniform. In some photos, she was examining artifacts. In others, teaching children. In one particularly striking image, she stood at the center of what appeared to be a ceremony, indigenous villagers surrounding her in a circle. "Who is she?" Lieutenant Rodriguez asked. Chen turned one photo over, handwriting on the back, faded but legible. Helena. March 1944. Not letters from Dr. Helena Marsh. Letters to Dr. Helena Marsh, because she was here. In the jungle, with Ashford. The revelation hit like a physical blow. Military intelligence had assumed Marsh was safely in England throughout the war. But she'd been here, in Burma, living in the jungle with a man the British Army considered a deserter. More containers revealed journals, not Ashford's this time. These belonged to Helena Marsh, and they were written with the precision of a trained anthropologist. September 1942. Richard's discovery confirms my hypothesis. The linguistic patterns aren't Sino-Tibetan, they're older, pre-migration. If I'm correct, this community represents an unbroken line stretching back millennia. Chen photographed every page, her mind racing through the implications. Marsh hadn't just supported Ashford's decision to desert, she'd orchestrated it, encouraged it, joined him. November 1942. Arrived at Richard's compound today after 3 weeks of difficult travel. The military believes I'm conducting research in Calcutta. They won't look for me here. Richard has done remarkable work securing this location. The village elders trust him completely. The journals detailed a partnership that defied every convention of wartime conduct. Marsh and Ashford weren't running from the war. They were conducting their own mission, one they believed superseded military objectives. January 1943. The children are teaching me their songs. Richard was right to call me here. What we're preserving isn't just a culture. It's a knowledge system that predates written history. The elders speak of a time before kingdoms, before empires. Their oral traditions contain astronomical observations that shouldn't be possible without instruments. Chen paused at that entry. Astronomical observations? She flipped ahead, looking for specifics. March 1943. Tonight, the elders showed us the stone markers. Richard and I spent hours documenting the positions. The alignment corresponds to celestial events from over 4,000 years ago. This isn't primitive superstition, this is sophisticated scientific knowledge preserved through oral tradition. 4,000 years. Chen's archaeological training told her that was impossible for this region. The accepted historical timeline didn't allow for that level of astronomical sophistication in pre-literate Burma, unless everything they thought they knew was wrong. May 1943. Richard is learning their language faster than I am. He has a gift for it. Yesterday, he participated in his first ceremony as a full member of their community. The elders have given him a name in their tongue. He won't tell me what it means, but he wept when they spoke it. The entries painted a picture of two people who'd found something they considered more important than the war consuming the world. But they also revealed growing tensions. August 1943. Received word through our contact in Rangoon. British intelligence is still looking for Richard. They've classified him as a deserter, possibly dead. I suggested we send some sign that he's alive, but he refuses. He says any contact with the outside world risks exposing this place. Chen's team had found more buildings by now. One contained what appeared to be a research station, primitive by modern standards, but sophisticated for jungle conditions, tables for artifact examination. A makeshift laboratory, shelves lined with carefully labeled specimens. And maps. Dozens of hand-drawn maps showing the surrounding jungle in meticulous detail. Notations marked villages, water sources, ancient sites. One map particularly caught Chen's attention. It showed a location marked with a red X, labeled simply, "The Origin Point." "Found something," Sergeant Williams called from outside. Chen emerged to find her team had uncovered a pathway. Stone markers, barely visible under decades of growth, led deeper into the jungle, away from the compound, toward the mountains. They followed it for 2 hours, the markers becoming more elaborate as they progressed. Not simple stones anymore. Carved monuments, weathered by time but definitely artificial. The craftsmanship was extraordinary. The path ended at a cave entrance. Natural formation, but modified. The opening had been deliberately shaped, widened. Stone steps descended into darkness. Chen activated her flashlight and started down. The air grew cooler as they descended. The walls showed evidence of tool marks. This wasn't a natural cave system. It had been worked, expanded, turned into something else. The passage opened into a chamber, and Chen stopped breathing. The walls were covered in carvings, not primitive scratchings, detailed, precise engravings showing astronomical charts, mathematical calculations, what appeared to be written language. But not any language Chen recognized. The script was unlike anything in the archaeological record. "This can't be real," Rodriguez whispered. But it was real. Carbon dating would later confirm the carvings were over 3,000 years old, older than the accepted timeline for complex civilization in this region, older than it should be possible. In the center of the chamber stood a stone table. On it, more journals. These ones different, leather-bound, European-made, but the writing inside was the indigenous script, Ashford's handwriting, but not in English. He'd learned to write in their language. Completely, Chen carefully opened the first journal. Even without understanding the script, she could see the precision. Mathematical formulas, diagrams, references to the carvings on the walls. Ashford hadn't just gone native. He'd become a scholar of whatever knowledge system these people preserved. The last journal was different. English again. Recent. The leather wasn't aged like the others. Chen opened it with trembling hands. The first entry was dated January 2018, 67 years after Ashford was declared dead. "My name is James Ashford. I am the grandson of Colonel Richard Ashford. I am writing this because someone needs to know the truth before it's lost forever." Chen's world tilted. The grandson, alive, recent. My grandfather died in 1989. I was 15. He spent his final years teaching me everything he'd learned. The language, the history, the responsibility. He made me promise to protect this place, these people, this knowledge. I've kept that promise for 29 years. The entries that followed explained everything. After the war ended, Ashford and Marsh had remained in the jungle. They'd married in a traditional ceremony, had children, raised them in both worlds, the indigenous community and the fragments of Western civilization they maintained. Helena Marsh died in 1967. Ashford lived another 22 years. Their children, 3 of them, had scattered. One returned to England. One moved to Thailand. One, James's father, stayed. The village is smaller now, James wrote. Only 37 people remain who speak the old language fluently. The modern world is encroaching. Roads, logging, development. My grandfather feared this day would come. The most recent entry was dated March 2024. 4 months ago, I'm dying. Cancer. No treatment possible out here, and I won't leave. This is my home. These are my people. I'm writing this for whoever finds it. The knowledge preserved here matters. The astronomical observations, the mathematical systems, the oral histories, they represent an understanding of the world that predates our civilization's assumptions. Protect it, study it. Don't let it disappear into academic obscurity or government secrecy. My grandfather gave everything for this. So did Helena. So have I. Make it mean something. The journal ended there. No final entry. No goodbye. Chen closed the book and looked around the chamber. 3,000 years of knowledge carved into stone walls, 80 years of sacrifice to protect it. And now, the weight of that responsibility falling on her shoulders. Chen's hands were still shaking when she heard footsteps behind her. Rodriguez stood in the doorway, his face pale. There's someone outside. Her heart stopped. What? An old man, indigenous. He's just standing there, watching the entrance. Chen carefully placed James's journal back on the stone table and followed Rodriguez out of the chamber. The jungle light was fading, casting long shadows through the canopy. Standing at the edge of the clearing was a man who looked to be in his 70s, maybe 80s. His weathered face carried the kind of deep lines that only decades in harsh conditions could create. He spoke. Not in English, not in Thai. The words were rhythmic, deliberate, ancient-sounding. Do you understand him? Rodriguez whispered. Chen shook her head. But then the old man switched languages. His English was accented but clear. You found the chamber. Yes, Chen managed. We didn't mean to trespass. We were following James's instructions. The old man stepped closer. He told me someone would come eventually, a scientist, someone who would understand what this place means. You knew James? He was my teacher, my friend. He died 3 weeks ago. The man's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes deepened. I am Somchai. I am one of 37, soon to be fewer. The number matched James's journal entry exactly. Somchai gestured toward the temple structure. You've seen the walls, the calculations. You understand what they represent? I think so, Chen said carefully. Advanced astronomical observations, mathematical systems that predate accepted timelines. But I don't understand the language. Few do anymore. Somchai's voice carried a weight that went beyond sadness. My generation is the last. When we die, the oral tradition dies with us. James understood this. He spent 40 years documenting everything, but documentation isn't the same as living knowledge. Rodriguez had been silent, but now he spoke up. The British government thinks Colonel Ashford went rogue. They classified everything about his disappearance. They would. Somchai's laugh was bitter. Because acknowledging the truth would mean acknowledging their ignorance. Richard Ashford discovered something that challenged every assumption about human civilization in this region. Rather than study it, they buried it. Chen felt the pieces clicking into place. The artifacts in the temple. They're not just old. They're proof of advanced knowledge systems that existed thousands of years before European contact. Exactly. Somchai moved toward the temple entrance. Come, I'll show you something James couldn't document. Inside the main chamber, Somchai approached one of the carved walls. His fingers traced specific symbols in a pattern Chen couldn't follow. Then he pressed. Something clicked deep within the stone. A section of the wall shifted inward, revealing a narrow passage. James knew about this, Somchai said, but he never wrote it down. Some knowledge, he believed, should only be shared in person, with those who earn it. The passage descended steeply into darkness. Somchai produced a flashlight, modern and incongruous, against the ancient stone. They followed him down. The air grew cooler. Chen's archaeological training told her they were moving below the water table, which should be impossible without modern engineering. The passage opened into another chamber, smaller than the first, but the walls here were different. Instead of carvings, they were covered in what looked like maps, star charts. Astronomical diagrams showing celestial movements with precision that shouldn't have been possible without telescopes. This is the heart of it, Somchai said quietly. What your academic institutions would call impossible, what governments would classify as too dangerous for public knowledge. Chen moved closer to the walls, her archaeologist's mind racing. The charts showed planetary movements, eclipse cycles, even what appeared to be calculations for stellar distances. The level of mathematical sophistication was staggering. How? Rodriguez breathed. That's the question everyone asks. Somchai's voice echoed in the chamber. How did an isolated community develop this knowledge? The answer is simple. They weren't isolated. Not 3,000 years ago. He pointed to a specific section of wall showing what looked like a trade network. Lines connecting points across Southeast Asia, into China, down to Indonesia, even extending toward India and the Pacific. Before empires, before the historical record you accept as truth, there was contact, exchange of knowledge, mathematical systems developed in one place, refined in another, preserved here when everywhere else forgot. Chen's mind was reeling. If this was authentic, if the dating held up, it would rewrite fundamental assumptions about ancient history, about the development of civilization, about knowledge transfer across cultures. Why hide it? She asked. Why not share this with the world? Somchai's expression hardened. Because the world doesn't preserve, it consumes. James's grandfather understood this. He watched colonial powers strip entire cultures of their heritage, lock artifacts in museums, rewrite histories to center themselves. He chose protection over glory, but James wanted it documented. James watched our numbers dwindle. He understood we couldn't protect it forever. Somchai turned to face her directly. The question is, can you? Can your institution handle this responsibly? Or will it become another curiosity, another exhibit, stripped of context and meaning? Chen didn't have an answer. She thought about her university, about academic politics, about the pressure to publish, to claim discoveries, to build careers on findings like this. Rodriguez spoke up. What if we did it differently? What if the community maintained control, decided what gets shared and how? Somchai studied him. You understand the problem. I've seen what happens when outsiders claim ownership of indigenous knowledge, Rodriguez said. My family's from Mexico. I know what cultural appropriation looks like in academia. For the first time, Somchai smiled. James said the right people would find this place. Perhaps he was correct. They spent the next 2 hours in the chamber. Somchai explained what he could, translating symbols, sharing oral histories that provided context for the carvings. Chen recorded everything with his permission, her mind cataloging implications that would take years to fully process. The sun was setting when they emerged back into the jungle. Somchai led them to a small village, a kilometer from the temple site. 37 people, he'd said. Chen counted maybe 20 structures, traditional houses adapted with modern materials. Solar panels sat alongside thatched roofs. Satellite dishes pointed skyward next to hand-carved totems. "We're not separate from the modern world," Somkai explained. "We just choose what we adopt and what we preserve." An elderly woman approached, speaking in the indigenous language. Somchai responded, then turned to Chen. "My sister. She wants to know if you'll stay for dinner." They stayed for 3 days. During that time, Chen learned more than any academic text could teach. She met the remaining speakers of the ancient language, recorded their stories with explicit permission and clear agreements about usage rights, photographed the temple chambers under strict protocols about what could be published and what must remain protected. On the 3rd evening, Somchai handed her a sealed envelope from James. He prepared this before he died, instructions for whoever found the chamber. Chen opened it carefully. Inside was a letter in James's handwriting and a small key. "There's a safety deposit box in Bangkok," Somchai explained. "James maintained it for 40 years. Inside are his complete translations, his research, his grandfather's original journals. Everything needed to understand this place properly. The key is yours now. So is the responsibility." Chen stared at the key. "Such a small object. Such enormous weight. What if I can't protect it?" she whispered. "Then you find someone who can." Somchai's voice was firm. "James spent his life on this. His grandfather gave up everything. Helena Marsh died here, far from her home, because she believed it mattered. Don't let their sacrifice be meaningless." That night, Chen couldn't sleep. She lay in the small guest house, listening to jungle sounds, thinking about choices made 80 years ago that led to this moment. Richard Ashford had walked away from his entire life. Helena Marsh had chosen love and knowledge over comfort and safety. James had inherited their mission and carried it forward. Now it was her turn. Morning came with clarity. Chen knew what she had to do, but the path forward required careful navigation through institutional politics, ethical obligations, and the weight of history she now carried. Back in Bangkok 2 weeks later, she sat across from Dr. Patricia Winters, her department chair at the University of Georgia. The safety deposit box contents were spread across the conference table. James's translations, Richard's journals, Helena's botanical sketches, 80 years of accumulated knowledge. This is extraordinary. Winters breathed, examining a page of translations. "Rebecca, this could redefine our understanding of pre-Columbian migration patterns. The linguistic connections alone, it's not ours to redefine anything with," Chen interrupted. Winters looked up sharply. "The community that protected this knowledge for generations gets to decide what happens next. Not us. Not the university. Not academic journals hungry for groundbreaking publications." Silence filled the room. Chen could see the conflict in Winters's expression, decades of academic training warring with ethical consideration. "The university funded your research," Winters said carefully. "There are expectations, obligations. I know. I'll fulfill them, but on terms that respect the source." Chen pulled out a document she'd spent days drafting. Co-authorship with community elders, shared copyright. Revenue from any publications split equally. Community veto power over what gets released and how it's contextualized. Winters read through the proposal, her expression unreadable. "The board will never approve this. It sets a precedent that undermines traditional academic ownership models. Then maybe those models need undermining." The words hung between them. Chen thought about James, choosing obscurity over fame. Richard, walking away from everything. Helena, dying in a jungle she'd made her home. Winters set down the document. "You understand what you're sacrificing? This discovery could make your career. Publications, speaking engagements, tenure-track positions at top institutions. You're proposing to give most of that away. I'm proposing to do it right." 3 months of negotiations followed. The university administration pushed back hard. Legal teams debated intellectual property rights. Ethics committees convened. Chen found unexpected allies among younger faculty members and, surprisingly, in the anthropology department, where Dr. Marcus Webb had spent his career fighting similar battles. "Academia is changing," Webb told her over coffee one afternoon. "Slowly, painfully, but changing. Indigenous communities are reclaiming their narratives. What you're proposing accelerates that shift." The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A private foundation focused on cultural preservation contacted Chen directly. They'd heard about the discovery through academic networks and wanted to fund further research, but only under ethical partnership models. "We're tired of extraction disguised as scholarship," the foundation director explained during a video call. "Your proposal aligns with our values. We'll fund 5 years of collaborative research if the community agrees." Somchai's response was cautious but open. "Come back. Spend time here. Let us see if you understand what partnership truly means." Chen returned to the village in April, 9 months after her initial discovery. This time she came not as a researcher claiming discovery, but as a guest seeking permission. She brought cameras, recording equipment, and translation software, all presented as tools available to the community, not instruments of extraction. The village had changed subtly. More solar panels, a new well, small improvements funded by tourism, Somchai carefully controlled, bringing in select groups interested in cultural exchange rather than exploitation. James's letter included instructions for this too, Somchai explained one evening. "He knew eventually the world would find us. Technology makes isolation impossible. His question was whether we'd be ready, whether we'd have partners who understood reciprocity." They developed protocols together. Community members would participate in all research. Their names would appear on publications as full co-authors, not just acknowledgments. Traditional knowledge would be clearly marked as such, credited properly. Sensitive information would remain protected. The first joint publication appeared 18 months after Chen's initial discovery. It was careful, measured, presenting linguistic findings while protecting specific locations and sacred knowledge. The academic response was mixed. Some praised the ethical framework, others criticized it as too restrictive, arguing knowledge should be freely shared. Chen found herself in debates she'd never anticipated. Conference presentations where she defended community control over their own heritage. Panel discussions about decolonizing research methodologies. Arguments with colleagues who viewed cultural knowledge as humanity's collective property. "You're setting a dangerous precedent," one senior professor told her after a particularly heated panel. "Science requires openness. Restricting information based on cultural ownership hinders progress." "Whose progress?" Chen shot back. "The communities this knowledge comes from rarely benefit from our publications. We build careers on their heritage while they remain marginalized." She thought often about the choices made 80 years earlier. Richard Ashford hadn't published his findings because he understood the cost of exposure. Helena Marsh had dedicated her life to partnership, not extraction. James had maintained that commitment for decades. 2 years after the initial discovery, Chen received news that changed everything again. Developers had purchased land adjacent to the protected forest zone. Construction permits had been fast-tracked through corrupt officials. The temple site, still officially unregistered, sat directly in the proposed development path. Somchai called her in the middle of the night. "Bangkok time. We need to go public. File for heritage protection. It's the only way to stop them." Chen understood the dilemma immediately. Protecting the site required revealing its significance. But revelation brought exactly the attention James had spent a lifetime avoiding. "What do you need from me?" she asked. "Everything. Documentation, academic validation, international pressure. We're filing with UNESCO for World Heritage consideration. Your research provides the foundation." The next 6 months were chaos. Press conferences, heritage board presentations, legal challenges from developers who stood to lose millions. Chen found herself navigating spaces she'd never trained for. translating academic findings into legal arguments, cultural significance into bureaucratic language. The temple chamber photographs, carefully selected to show significance without revealing sacred details, appeared in National Geographic. Chen's name was on the byline, but so were 5 community members, their voices centered in the narrative. UNESCO's decision came on a gray morning in Geneva. Chen sat with Somchai and 2 village elders in the gallery, watching bureaucrats debate their heritage in languages requiring translation. The vote was unanimous. World Heritage status granted, development halted, protection secured. Somchai wept quietly. The elders held hands. Chen felt the weight of 80 years lifting, James's mission finally complete. But protection brought new challenges. Tourism increased despite careful management. Academic researchers requested access. Documentary filmmakers proposed projects. Each request required evaluation, negotiation, boundary setting. "This is the work now," Somchai told Chen during her last visit. "Not discovery, but stewardship." James understood that. His grandfather learned it. Now we teach it to the next generation. Chen's career took an unexpected trajectory. She became known not for traditional academic achievements, but for developing ethical research frameworks. Universities consulted her on indigenous partnership protocols. Foundations sought her input on cultural preservation funding. The key from James's letter sat on her desk, a reminder of responsibility inherited. Inside that Bangkok safety deposit box remained documents still unpublished, knowledge still protected, waiting for the right moment, the right context, the right partnership. Some colleagues called her career wasted potential. Others saw pioneering work in research ethics. Chen stopped caring about others' assessments. She'd learned a different measure of success from people who'd protected knowledge for generations, while the academic world valued only extraction. On the 5th anniversary of finding the temple chamber, Chen stood once more in that carved space. Somchai beside her, showing the site to his daughter, explaining their family's role in its protection. James's legacy continued not through publications or fame, but through relationships, through respect, through choosing partnership over possession. The carvings still held mysteries. Probably always would. Some knowledge wasn't meant for outsiders, regardless of credentials or good intentions. Chen had made peace with that limitation. Understanding wasn't the same as ownership. Appreciation didn't require complete access. She thought about Richard Ashford one last time, imagining him making his choice 80 years ago, leaving everything behind because some things mattered more than career, recognition, or conventional success. Helena Marsh, choosing love and purpose over comfort. James carrying their torch through decades of obscurity. The pattern was clear now. Each generation faced the same choice, dressed in different circumstances. Extraction or partnership, possession or respect, career advancement or ethical obligation. Chen had made her choice. Whoever came next would make theirs. She wondered who would stand in this chamber in another 80 years, what they would choose, whether the lessons learned across generations would hold, or whether each age had to relearn what James's grandfather understood in 1942. The answer wasn't hers to determine. Protection was always temporary, stewardship always conditional. The best she could do was build frameworks strong enough to survive her own limitations, partnerships genuine enough to outlast individual careers. Somchai's daughter asked a question in the old language. Her father responded, then translated for Chen. "She wants to know if you'll come back next year." Chen nodded. "Every year I can." "Good. We have more to teach you." There it was. After 5 years, she was still learning, still being taught, not extracting knowledge, but receiving it as gift, as trust, as responsibility that came with obligations extending beyond academic publication. The temple would outlast them all. The carvings would remain after everyone who currently understood them was gone. But maybe, just maybe, the partnerships built now would create something sustainable. A different model, where knowledge flowed through respect rather than extraction, where communities controlled their own narratives, where researchers served rather than claimed. Colonel Richard Ashford had vanished into the jungle 84 years ago. But he'd never been lost. He'd been exactly where he chose to be, protecting something that mattered more than recognition. His secret wasn't the location of a hidden compound or the contents of ancient carvings. His secret was understanding that some choices transcend individual ambition, that preservation sometimes requires sacrifice, that the greatest discoveries aren't always meant to be shouted from academic journals but protected, honored, and passed forward through relationships built on trust. Chen touched the carved wall one final time. The stone was cool under her fingers, unchanged by centuries, indifferent to human dramas playing out in its shadow. Somewhere in this jungle, Richard Ashford's bones rested alongside Helena Marsh's. James's grave marked a hillside overlooking the village. 3 lives dedicated to a mission larger than themselves. Their work continued, not through fame or recognition, but through choices made daily by people who understood what they'd understood. Protection over possession, partnership over extraction. Legacy measured not in publications but in relationships sustained across generations. That was the real discovery. Not ancient astronomical knowledge or linguistic mysteries, but a different way of being in the world, one that recognized knowledge as living relationship rather than inert resource. Richard Ashford had learned it from the village elders. Helena Marsh had embraced it. James had carried it forward. Now it was Chen's to steward and eventually pass on. She followed Somchai and his daughter back toward the village, leaving the temple chamber to its silence. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new requests from researchers wanting access, new threats requiring navigation. But today, she walked through dappled jungle light, grateful for teachers patient enough to share wisdom with a student still learning what questions to ask. This case was intense, but this case on the right-hand side is even more insane.